A very, very warm welcome to those of you who don't know me. My name is Dharmendra Kanani. I am Chief Operating Officer and Chief Spokesperson at Friends of Europe, and I have the pleasure and the privilege to be with you, but hopefully most of you, all day long. You will have me in most of the main sessions. Firstly, to say we're delayed because we are sold out and house full even more. We've lost chairs. Every single chair's gone, and we're still struggling to find chairs for the people who are still standing there. So I should say thank you to all of you for turning up, and those of you and more. Clearly, this was a debate that you wanted to be a part of. We're very grateful to you for turning up. Secondly, I wanted to let you know that obviously you'll see that Mr. Costa's not behind me. I will be on the panel with him, but he couldn't turn up. He obviously we're all important people, but Mr. Costa's slightly more important given the job he's doing. And he's caught up with, the council meeting that's taking place, so he could not make the time to be here. So we have more time, but unfortunately, because of the unprecedented representation that's coming to this room, we started a little bit later than usual. I also want to welcome those of you who are joining online. I think we have several hundreds of people who are watching through live stream. So welcome to all of you, and I hope that you are able to feel as present in this conversation as the people who are here physically. It's a very timely debate, people might say. It's Europe now or never. As Europe's movement, people talk about it so often, this notion of let's deconstruct what's going on in the world. And I suppose there's a time that perhaps we need to have a different kind of conversation. I was reflecting on how do you introduce this 22nd edition of State of Europe Roundtable, given where the world finds itself, because it will be just so kind of wry to say that, oh, well, things have turned really terrible, etc., and so forth. But it feels nonsensical to do that. So I thought of two things. One, what was happening 22 years ago that might shed light on our current circumstances? Yes or no, I don't know. Those of you, there aren't that many spring chickens in this room, so hopefully you remember 2003, that, we had the raging war of Afghanistan. We had the US coalition invading Iraq. We had the post 9/11 syndrome, where security and defense was being shaped by that pivotal event and that continue to ricochet into all aspects of our world. Closer to home, in that year, there was the planning for the largest big bang of enlargement. The 10 countries coming in. So that was just 20 years ago in the thinking that was going through the negotiation and the turmoil politically to increase and enlarge Europe. You remember the European Convention, that lovely little body that was set up to be able to try and create a brand new treaty, which failed. But there you go, it happened. And you obviously had a year after the currency having been made and being successfully brought into Europe and changing the economic livelihood of a lot of Europe. And so there's something about the fact that at that time, those of us who remember, felt that sense of fragility of the world that it found itself in. But the two things that I suppose are dramatically different are that our Mother Earth is giving us many and multiple messages about the damage we're doing to it, and yet politicians, especially since January, seem to have given very little thought to the urgency. So whilst we are suddenly experiencing extremities of weather, they're suddenly becoming normalized. So now when you're here in October and you had like 28 degrees in Brussels and Belgium, people say, that's great, it's really good weather. When you say, well, actually, this is climate change, people kind of have normalized it all over the world. And we do it. There are people in this room. We all do it in different ways. It's not galvanizing political action to adapt, mitigate, and prevent. It's there. And I think that that's one thing that we really need to be mindful of. The second is, 22 years ago, we didn't have rampant AI. If those of you have been reading anything in The Economist about how the super rich platform owners are building bunkers below their homes because they're worried not only about war, but about the fact that AI might come to a point where it may be more intelligent than us. Politicians are scratching their heads and thinking, how do we regulate this thing? Which has no borders. We know it's operating at a level that none of us really understand, and yet we have the finest brains in the world that could be brought together to think about, can you create some sort of global regulatory framework for AI, which will define who and how we are into the future. And all along, what we've had, and I will conclude on some of these last points, is that to reflect with you, isn't it amazing that how our political, economic, and social atmosphere has changed in 9 months? 9 months and a few presidential orders. Our atmosphere has changed. Since when did empathy, compassion, love, kindness, sense of humanity, rights, equity, and equality become a leftist project? Suddenly it's a leftist project. When? When did it become a leftist project? And why have we all tacitly accepted it? Suddenly you can't talk about equality, inclusion, and diversity. We've just expected, well, there's an atmosphere, there's a chill in the air, because a presidential order said, well, no, it's not part of what we do. Yet we don't have an outpouring across the world that those of us you should, you've been through academia, you've watched Netflix. We've gained so much social progress in 80 years since the Second World War and more. Yet, since January, we've forgotten what that was about. And we suddenly are in a period of time where, do you remember that sense of fear and vulnerability? You know that fear and vulnerability are powerful emotions, where fear determines people's decisions, public debate, and also a culture and a climate where institutions are even not being able to challenge what's going on. That old saying, if you're a bystander, you're not. You're actually part of the problem. And I think that we seem to forget that what was happening in the 1920s, we are reliving in a different context. But there's a kind of, and this final point is that what's most shocking, not only the absence of a response to what's taking place since January, and again, remind you, in 9 months, the atmosphere has changed. That since January, we have this dynamism of a me first syndrome. To hell with everybody else. And that me first syndrome has become a worm in the system. It's determining behavior. It's determining how we view multilateralism. It's determining how we treat our neighbors and how we treat those furthest out of our material circumstances. And by that I mean those who are running away from war, extreme climate change, but also sense of poverty. But we suddenly believe, no. We now are able to talk about immigration, migration, asylum seekers, and conflate them with black and ethnic minority people in a way that we never would have been able to do beforehand. But suddenly it's become acceptable. And I think that's what we just need to be mindful of, that if we don't take time out to breathe and look at what's happening, the game's a bogey. And actually our children, especially younger generation, who are growing up on the telephone, the mobile phone, and also a very virtual life, my goodness, if we don't remember, how will they remember, and how will they know that the world could have been a better place? And on that cheery note, I will first, we have a lovely cast list for you to talk about some of these issues. We have a household brand, Netflix. We have a household credit card, Mastercard. We have, and we're throwing in for good measure, an ex-Italian Prime Minister. We have McKinsey Global Institute and many others. So I'm going to first go to Madeleine, if I may. Where are you? I can't see you. You're right in front of me. So, Netflix. Everyone knows you. Everyone has you in their house and on their phones. Madeleine, could you share with us the type of contribution Netflix is making to Europe?
That's such a great question, because it's all about contribution, right? How we can all contribute to Europe. I'm Madeleine, I'm the contributing vice president at Netflix, and I'm super grateful to be here with all of you and to talk about our contribution and all of our contribution. Talking about Europeans' future, of course, we're going to focus on competitiveness, because competitiveness is key for the future for Europe. So who has attended the dinner yesterday? We all heard Letta talk about the importance of leadership, but also of storytelling as a key factor for success. And we support the competitiveness agenda deeply. The focus on Europe's ability to innovate, produce and grow. And this can be done by, and it has been said so many times and will be saying much more times as well, the single market. Investing in skills and technology, supporting strategic industry, and thriving cultural and creative sectors are a key part of this agenda. We all have experienced firsthand how the cultural industries bring joy and connection, bring people closer together and create understanding. But they don't stop there. They also drive economic growth. And just talk a little bit about Netflix. For instance, between 2020 and 2023, we collaborated with nearly 500 European production companies, supporting 110,000 jobs. And these companies, many of whom are small, medium enterprises, work directly with suppliers for the equipment and service required for productions. By supporting these local SMEs, we are creating a spillover effect, reaching tourism, manufacturing, technology, and education. Fun fact, if you watch a Netflix series from a beautiful place, you're 2.5 times more likely to want to visit that place. So that's good for tourism and good for economics. Today, we're joined by Paris Costume, one of our valued creative partners who have worked on many Netflix shows all over Europe, like The Beloved Empress or Il Gatto Pardo. And Paris also now crafts costumes worldwide, showcasing how European creativity and entrepreneurship are thriving globally. Their success is a testament to the amazing potential of our creative industries. And some facts by Europe itself, the European Audiovisual Observatory counted 7.7 million people working in the cultural and creative sectors. That's almost 4% of the total EU employment. Furthermore, Oldsberg showed that for every euro spent in production, 67 cents will go back to the wider economy. So now about stories. As you said, they bring us closer together. They connect us with the lives of others and they create empathy and understanding. And through subtitles and dubbing, we are able to bridge languages and borders. We just talked about the languages with Letta before this. Stories like Il Gatto Pardo, Tour de France, or even I Hostage from the Netherlands, I'm Dutch as you can hear by my accent, have connected communities around the world. This is one of the things I love so much about working at Netflix actually. And now think about the future, because the future is here. We are committed to creators and the next generation of talent and bring stories to life. So the last couple of years, we ran over 300 skills and talent development programs, reaching 26,000 people in more than 15 countries. We educated writers, directors, producers, below-the-line talent from pre-careers to established industry professionals. This is what we contribute. We want to contribute and we want to keep doing that. And just a week ago, we were in Paris, where we joined forces with Gobelin and Guillermo del Toro to launch an animation studio that will support storytellers and the beautiful craft of stop motion. And by attracting and developing the best talent, we are making Europe one of the best places to work in television and film, while elevating the industries connecting to it and strengthening cultural exchange. So now, how?
Yes.
I saw your face.
You saw my face, okay.
To know that. Yes. How? Well, actually, it's vision, for sure, and competitiveness. So with regulation that encourages creativity versus limits it. Innovation and long-term thinking, avoiding unnecessary complexity. And I think the competitiveness agenda is all about that. Good rules are only one part of the equation at the same time, because we also see that enforcement is important. Enforcement helps create a level playing field for small businesses and for bigger businesses. We need to compete on equal terms. So we strongly support a strong internal market that fosters a plurality of voices and creates fair and legal climate for businesses, allowing companies to invest with confidence, because you need confidence to be able to invest. We must keep better regulation, and there's the package that you're aware of. At the heart of policymakers, rules must be proportionate, evidence-based, and built to last. So I would say the following. If these are in place, we're very optimistic of Europe. I'm sure cultural industries will continue to be a strength for Europe's competitiveness agenda, both economically and also culturally, creating connections, fueling growth, and connecting people. Thank you.
Thank you. So in terms of, from what I take from that, you're fairly optimistic.
Yeah,
And so, right, okay, so I painted a bleak picture, I'm afraid. I'm sorry about that.
yeah.
But
And
it's
therefore I
great,
paint an
great that you
optimistic
came
one.
the but in terms of what you would want legislators or policymakers to be taking away from your contribution, what is it? What's the message you want to give to the Commission? Because you spoke about the contribution. You also make a significant economic impact into Europe.
Yeah, so the last couple of years we invested 6.5 billion in content in Europe. So yes, we do. And what we just want is that we are able to thrive, that our creators are able to thrive, and therefore less complexity and more focus on future-proof regulation. And therefore we're really pumped and positive about the competitiveness agenda and a strong internal market, because we have to work all together to get that European creative sector successful.
Single market. How
Yes.
is that what you're really talking about? The fact that we need to get our act together and complete. Because we have Enrico here, his report. He'll speak about that later in a moment. But for Netflix, how important is it?
It's essential because content travels across borders, and that's the wonderful thing about content, because it creates this empathy and understanding, and we need to make sure that we're not confronted with different hurdles, different legislative systems throughout Europe. And that's not just good for us, but even more important, it's also good for European video on demand services, for instance, because for them it's even harder to cross the borders, because they will be confronted with a lot of legislation. We have a team of people that are making sure we're compliant, but we want to have competition, we want to have plurality, and we want to have a thriving, even more thriving cultural sector for Europe.
Jacqueline, thank you. You just switch your mic off, otherwise we'll get. Let's turn to another household brand. This time, it's quite ironic that it's called Money Matters this session, but it's not just about spending on your credit card or your Mastercard. Kelly, it's so good to have you here. Congratulations, because you've been newly appointed, and it must feel already like a lifetime away, but you are new in the context for Mastercard. So thank you for making the time, just like Jacqueline, to be here with us. In your perspective, and since you've been with Mastercard, what's your view on what Europe needs to do to prosper? Sounds like a naff question, but it's just simple and straightforward. What do we need to do?
I think it's a great question. So Kelly Devine, I run Mastercard in Europe, and I wanted to pick up. I suppose there's sort of two parts to my answer. I will keep them super quick, but I wanted to pick up first on the theme, one of the themes of yesterday evening, which was around hope. And I wanted to talk about the fact that my industry in payments, Europe is absolutely a hotbed of innovation. So many of the great things that have happened in the payments industry, and I know payments is probably not something everybody here thinks about all day, every day, but for sure you use it all day, every day, whether that's chip and PIN or contactless, or the work that we're doing in tokenization, which is keeping your account details safe. All of these innovations started in Europe and have scaled most quickly in Europe. So I think Europe has a huge amount to be proud of. And these innovations don't just drive economic growth, they also impact people's lives, which I think is exactly what you were talking about. You know, they have the power that if you are a tourist and you turn up somewhere in Europe, you know that your payments are going to be safe, they're going to work, and you're going to be protected. If you are an entrepreneur starting a business, you know that you can accept orders from across the world, from across Europe, and know that you're not going to be constrained by geographical borders. So these innovations matter, they change lives. So that's the hope part. I guess my challenge to ourselves at Mastercard and to the room is, how can we accelerate and leverage those innovations that start in Europe but don't always scale in Europe? And in that context, I wanted to talk particularly about public and private partnership. And of course, it's about how do we create the conditions for growth and investment. That's the standard story. But I think it's also about the things that private companies or public entities can't do by themselves. And for me, cybersecurity is kind of one of those things that's right at the top of that list. As Mastercard, we've invested 9 billion in cybersecurity since 2018. We have hundreds of professionals across Europe and the Ukraine. The world's largest threat intelligence company, Recorded Future, is a Mastercard company. But still, with all of that, we have to partner. We have to partner with NATO, with Europol, with the ECB, because we are only as strong as we stand together. Only yesterday we had cross-industry group in our headquarters down the road at Waterloo talking about sort of running a threat casting simulation exercise to
Excellent.
strengthen Europeans' defences.
Can I interrupt you? And I don't want to
Please.
disrupt your flow, but you know, you just referenced an ecology, right? That needs to work
Yes.
together. Is it working? Because you could do the industry bit, but the NATO bit, the public sector bit, is that happening?
It is working. I think this is one of those areas where the case for collaboration, the case for change is so high that absolutely we see it work. So I think that call to action is very, very compelling. I think the opportunity is to say where else are those areas, and that I think would be the thing that I would love us to think about as we go through this session this morning, is where are those other areas where we can create that same impact, create that growth by partnering and working together.
Great, and I'm glad you raised that issue, because there isn't now a week that goes by where something has not been buggered by cybersecurity. You know, whether it's thankfully the card will be safe, but you know, we've seen different parts of infrastructure, and most notably our airspace and air traffic, and you know, just even checking in. So you can just imagine what could happen if someone came with a really quite a kind of a fatal blow that's cross-cutting across the world, and it would be like watching a Netflix film. So you talked about that, and it's good that you brought up that issue of collaborative practice to tackle and prevent cybersecurity threats. Going back to what you do as a company, so what are you doing in Europe to change some of this? What's your contribution?
Yeah, and I think, so security is absolutely one of those key pillars of what it is that we need to do and what we can contribute in Europe. I think another big piece is resiliency. We are designating it as systemically important in Europe, which is because of the role that we play in people's everyday lives. We have 900 million cards in Europe. I think last quarter, 800 billion of euros of spend flowed over our network. So we take that responsibility. As you said, that's a pretty serious responsibility to make sure it shows up every day and it works. So we're doubling down on resilience. It's something we think about all day, every day. And I'm thrilled to be able to say, as part of that, we are bringing data centers on soil into Europe. So very specifically, we are opening...
So everyone, get your hand, get your tweeting away. Our staff, please make sure this is an announcement being made here. So
it is, absolutely. We are bringing 3 new data centers into Paris, which will give us the capability to process transactions in Europe. So that's resiliency for Mastercard, but that's also resiliency for Europe, and that's something that we are super proud of and very excited about. And just one more piece I wanted to mention beyond the resiliency piece, because I think those are the foundations. You know, security and resilience are the foundations, and then we need our growth engines on top of that. It's not enough just to defend. And I really wanted to call out, very similar to Madeleine, the role of small businesses, which are, of course, the backbone of Europe. 99% of merchants that we work with very closely are SMEs. So we have invested hugely in that population, helping businesses, 4.6 million businesses, to digitize. We've funded 10 European startups who are developing solutions for small businesses. And another commitment that we wanted to make today was that we are launching a free cybersecurity education program for 10 million SMEs across Europe, as well as an innovation program here in Belgium to accelerate innovation. And it really is, look, it's a professional commitment from Mastercard, but it's a personal commitment. We have 9,000 people in Europe, and they're proud to work for Mastercard, and they are proud to be European.
Go you, Kelly. Wow. Can we just kind of go back to that statement of what the displacement is for you as a company in terms of putting the data center, etc., here in Europe as opposed to anywhere else? So kind of what's the value there?
I think the value is twofold. I think one is modernization, and I think we're moving away from that very centralized model, which for us was centralized in the US, to a decentralized model, which enables us both to say, look, we can be here on soil in Europe for Europe, but it also means that should something unimaginable Netflix movie-ware kind of happen, it means we've got that resiliency to be able to move transactions from Europe to the US if we need to, or from Europe to Australia if we need to, from the US to Europe if we need to. So that resiliency, and I think that creates optionality for Europe, and it gives us it gives us resiliency in the face of the unimaginable.
But it also sends a powerful message, to your peer group. I mean, I'm sure there hasn't been a memo from the White House saying, how dare you move operations out of the US into Europe, but you never know. But what kind of, in terms of, you're part of a group of peers that are large, significant, and invest in Europe as well as the US. Is there a sense that more of you are thinking in these terms of like, not necessarily getting out of the US, but understanding that sense of what you call the need for resilience, but also making sure if anything goes wrong, you've got something else to count on?
Yeah, and we were talking last night at dinner about the need to be global, but what does it mean to be global? Global perhaps is an ephemeral thing. It means that everywhere that we are, we have to show up as a local. And I feel that being a Brit in the room representing a US company, and I appreciate
that's
the
globalization,
welcome.
Kelly,
yeah,
from
and
my
I appreciate the welcome
completely.
But it is very much about that. It's not a sort of nebulous global company. We're a European company, and we are very attuned to the European agenda, sovereign autonomy, and how do we, as Mastercard, show up in support of that agenda.
And finally, and I will let you go because you've made some significant announcements here today. But on the kind of almost the education, the online education learning on cybersecurity for SMEs, are you doing that by yourself, or are other companies coming in? Because it would make sense that SMEs need this absolutely critically. And I know a lot of research has been done that the adoption rate is the poorest in Europe in terms of both investing in digitalization but also cybersecurity. Is this you doing it yourself, or are you doing it with others?
I think when we do this program and other SME programs that we've done, we absolutely partner with very hyper-local companies, because the reality is that you have to be where the SMEs are. You can't expect them to come to you. So I think it's, particularly when you're working with small businesses, that ability to show up hyper-locally and be super relevant to them in the small community in which they've started in is critical to success.
And if people want to have more information about this, the program you're running and your investment, do we go to your website, or can we have details sent to us so we can put it on?
Well, yeah, we'll take that one away and make sure everyone's aware. And if people want to partner and be part of this, we'd love to talk to people.
That makes sense, no? I mean, there's no point lots of other companies putting up a program that you've already developed, because everyone's chasing the same target, SMEs, especially on this agenda. And we know that is a key issue. So thank you very much for your contribution. Sylvain, if I can turn to you. So let's take a different perspective. A very well-known firm, McKinsey Global Institute, they spend a lot of their time analyzing data and giving us lots of information, especially governments, about what people call the headwinds of economic forecasting. Let's forget headwinds. What's your take, Sylvain? You've heard we've heard a quite optimistic set of contributions from two very large companies, significant global companies. In terms of actually what's happening right now, which is not to say that what they said is wrong, but you and I, most people in the room, know that public debt is the highest ever on record. And we know that that's shaking itself out in terms of choices people are making, especially politicians, on whether welfare or something else, housing or something else. So where do we stand right now? What's your view?
Thanks, Dharmendra, for having me and the opportunity to share some of the views of McKinsey Global Institute. So you make it sound quite negative. So not all is bad in Europe, and I will start with some of the good news. Hope, that was the theme last night. Public debt in the Eurozone, by the way, is down from the peak during COVID, right? 10 percentage points. Of course, it's been helped by inflation, so denominator effect, but at least, some good news there. Second, our latest research on foreign direct investments shows FDI inflows into Europe is significantly up, 43% versus pre-COVID. We have now 170 billion per year going into Europe, and that's—
Is it from new places or the same?
Excluding intra-Europe,
okay,
from outside. And if you peel this down, it's 28 billion per year into data centers, mostly from US tech giants. That's great. It's 20 billion in energy infrastructure from Middle East, Asian investors. And it's about 18 billion into EV and battery projects, about half of which is from China. So Europe is attractive, right? People are investing in money, and that's part of the good news. And I think the third piece of good news is we have a shared diagnostic on we want to fix competitiveness. And I think we all agree a few years ago we didn't have that shared diagnostic, but at least that's part of good news. And now what are we going to do to address that? But not everything is rosy. We have a few clouds on the horizon. And the balance sheet of Europe and our latest research on the global balance sheet shows that we still have a very inflated balance sheet in Europe. And that's the consequence of 20 years of asset prices growing faster than the productive output. That's not a comfortable place where to be. The European households are actually saving more than in the decade before, 2010 to 2019, right? We are 3 percentage points above that in savings of disposable income. And that's, people see the high interest rate, they see the real estate, that they're worried, right? And so they save. And large corporates, think 1 billion or more revenues in Europe are spending every year 700 million less than their US counterparts in CapEx and R&D. And that's partly also because the return on the investment is lower, right? Think 200-300 basis points. And still on the clouds on the horizon, I talk about FDI inflows having gone up, which is great, 43%. But if you compare to the US, we used to be sort of at the same level, but we're now sort of 70% of the US level. We all know that's partly driven by what some administrations are doing, but and it's particularly pronounced in future shaping industries. So that's a bit of a worry also. And where we don't want to go is, the return to secular stagnation, high savings, low interest rate, low growth, limited investments. And so let's throw some spices and some ideas to address this, because I think we all have the same interest here. Let's change the odds for Europe. And more than anything, it's not just a public question, right? We need more investments. We need investments to come in. That will drive growth. That will drive productivity growth. And in the end, money goes where attractive investment can be made. So if I just have 4 short ideas. The first one, removing fragmentation. 28th policy regime, one of Enrico's favorite topics, is absolutely there. This is, our MGI research shows that a handful of standout firms drive a lot of the productivity growth in many of the countries.
Right.
We don't want to just be, a continent of small and medium-sized enterprise. It's good to have a large common market. It's good to have big firms. We need everything, but it's good. It's good to promote them. Let's be courageous to attract, alongside the public spending that we can still make, private innovation, private investments. Let's create the condition for venture capital, right? The VC pool in Europe is a quarter of the US VC pool. We have a lot of savings. Maybe we have some of the rules. Think, as an example, around solvency. Can we do something here to promote this? And last, I talked actually quite a lot about FDI, but these mega deals, now we see mega deals are up. It's less than 1% of the deals, but it's 50% of the value. And so this is just the reality of today. And so let's welcome those, and let's create the ecosystems around, so we absorb the innovation, we create the fabric around, and make Europe stronger.
Sylvain, thank you. I want to come back to you, because some of what you said, this is, let me just say it this way. A lot of what you said, we know about, okay? I mean, in the sense that we know we need more investment. We know we need, better or rather simpler regulatory framework to this. Are you saying the 28th regime, as an idea that's come through, is one of the stepping stones for greater competition? And before you answer that, and as a part of that, when you say the balance sheet of Europe is inflated, what does that actually mean in real terms?
So we are in a position that, when you are in an inflated balance sheet, you either come out with a reset, and that's not what you want to go. Partly that's what we've seen in China with real estate. Either you get out with productivity growth, and through productivity, you grow yourself out of it, or you stay in kind of a secular stagnation, and through low interest rate, having an inflated balance sheet and lots of debt is not that big of an issue. And that's where we don't want Europe to stay, where it's been for quite a few years. And so the reason, driving productivity growth and being more comfortable is what we're striving for. Yes, the 28th regime is one of the, in the end, it's all about investment that drives productivity growth, and that allows us to get out of these, for example, inflated balance sheet, and to promote, new jobs, new ideas, new innovation. And that's where, and part of this in today's modern world, our recent research shows, large firms pay a big part of it. And it's not only, but let's make the conditions in Europe good for small innovation. Let's make them benefit from the large market we have, as opposed to 27 regimes.
And do you hear from company CEOs telling you that they have to really work hard or either give up because each member state has its own, or actually member states don't make it easy for, let's say, X, Y, and Z, a global firm to invest in Paris, for example.
Well, I think there's lots of recognition that now there is a shared diagnostic. I think that's the big change.
Okay.
But we still need to see the action and the implementation of some of these. But at the same time, we, in our job, we talk to lots of firms, managers. We also tell them, bring forward your projects, your ideas, push your local government, push your local regulators, and tell them you want to do it. In the end, some will say, I don't have time for this, I'll go somewhere else, and some will push. And it's, once we create a few of these examples, we hope that this will further push and encourage the changes.
Yeah. It's a shame that when you think about who's in charge of that agenda within the Commission, you scratch your head a bit, right? Where would you go? And obviously, Enrico, you'll have a view on this, and I'll bring you in this, but it's not the classic, let's create a czar for innovation, but you do need someone in charge that's going to help this happen, and we'll come back to that in a moment. But thank you very much for your commentary. Before I bring in our other two discussants, has anyone kind of got a sharp intake of, belly pain or wanting to say, actually, I feel really strongly about something that I've heard just now? I.e., do you want to have a say before I bring anyone else in? At this stage? Okay, you're all good? Yeah? Hello. Please bring the mic to you and do introduce yourself.
Hello, good morning, everyone. I'm Ingrid Dervaux. I'm a French judge, and I'm also the Secretary General of the European Judicial Training Network, which brings together all the national judicial training institutions in Europe. And we are celebrating our 25th anniversary this year. And it's very inspiring for me to hear from you because, indeed, with our network, we deliver training activities to judges, prosecutors, court staff from all across Europe for them to be trained together, for them to know each other, and for them to cooperate efficiently together. And the network was created in 2000 to support the creation of the European area of justice and indeed to strengthen also the single market. Because there can be no single market if indeed you have different rules, but also if you have different interpretations of the rules. And if you have no cooperation, efficient cooperation between the justice practitioners. So I'm very much interested in the initiatives which have been launched already for education, to know for which target audience, and also to see if there is any cooperation that has been thought or that has been tried to be launched, because I'm very much willing to know how we can enrich the work we do now, welcoming more than 10,000 participants in our activities per year, thanks to the strong support of the European Commission. Because we are a unique network in this field. So I would very much like to hear from you if there are any context, any cooperation with the judiciary, which is essential to strengthen the single market.
I'm really pleased you're here. Thank you. Thank you for picking up on the the baton. And so just as a reminder to everyone, this is, as you know already, this isn't a classic conference or a summit. It's not a kind of a Q&A to speakers. This is about the collective brain in the room working together differently and better. So we'll get others to reflect on what you've just said. What's the judiciary saying to you at the moment in terms of what's going on in Europe? What's the mood music? Because it'll be fascinating, because it's the anchor for rule of law to a certain extent. You're quite right about the interpretation. And also, they're being challenged by digitalization, because there's certain things that are happening in the digital world that judges will absolutely find hard to note down in terms of using existing law.
Absolutely. What you have said is absolutely true. At the beginning, it's a switch. And it's a switch for all of us, and you know that there is no rule of law without a competent and an efficient judiciary, because the ultimate guarantor of the rule of law are the judges at the end, to ensure that there is no authority, that there is no organization which is above the law, and that the same rules are applied to everybody. And for that, the judges, the judiciary, they must be trained enough. They must be able to fulfill their mission in a new digital world, which is changing for everybody. So when we talk about also cybersecurity, now that we are also going to digitalize, and we are digitalizing our justice systems, then also the judges, the prosecutors, the court staff which are dealing with justice and with also data of citizens, they must be aware of the risks, and they must also be able to ensure that the security is enough. So it requires new skills for them as well to ensure and to promote the rule of law in a new world in which all of us, we are adapting, in which all of us, we are kind of trying to find our way. So it's an immense challenge for us as judicial training institutions together to find a way to train efficiently the judiciary in that sense. And I would say one of the answers is unity, is putting together, bringing the most we can, all the information in order to have the big picture. This is what the judiciary needs, and also cooperation, of course. So it's to ensure the single market, we need enough training activities, but we need also enough dialogue altogether to make sure that we can harmonize, but also take into account the diversity we have still in our Europe, and which is also our richness. So.
Thank you for being here and providing that kind of really interesting take that we wouldn't ordinarily get in this kind of conversation. All I can say is let's just hope that the judiciary can stand up to the likes of Orban and Mr. Trump that wants to fiddle around with their independence. But hey, there's a trend, but I think that we have a good standing in Europe that we can hopefully stand up against that. But thank you for that contribution. And finally you, before I move on to our other contributors.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. My name is Pia-Lena Lange. I'm a representative of a company called Trina Solar. We manufacture, as the name says, solar panels, but it was a battery, so we play a quite pivotal role to the energy transition. And I would like to pick up on the topic of competitiveness and investments. And I will say something that everyone is saying in the town, yet it is true. The regulatory uncertainty and fragmentation in the EU is a real pain to investments. We are one of the big three in the world to, manufacture solar modules, so we are not a small company. We have the bandwidth to invest, and we do that everywhere in the world. We have been awarded under the Innovation Fund. We have joined up with European companies in order to invest here, and yet it remains so difficult to make a business case, a long-term business case that is not standing on subsidies for Europe. And I think that really needs to be addressed at one point. We cannot just be looking, okay, what are others doing? And how do we compete with others? But we really have to look at...
Where does, if you were to have that one ask, you've got the Commission in front of you, you're not small, as you say, you're really significant, and you're saying what you're saying. So what's that one or two things that you think need to shift? Because you can say, oh, complete the single market. We're not going to do that by tomorrow.
No.
What are the things that would actually facilitate and enable what you're talking about?
For example, the Net Zero Industry Act really is, for us, one of the key points here. It is encouraging investment, but it is so hugely vague in the wording. It does not give any clear future outlook on, do you want that it is European? And if you want that it is European, what does it mean? So it really needs to be the single market in the short term, in very practical terms, and that is be clear about the regulatory or the policy strategy that Europe wants to write.
And so the notion of the 28th regime, because the Made in Europe is another, unfortunately, sloganeering with very little content behind it. But in terms of the 28th regime, which we could, there is a capability within the regulatory framework of Europe, which is called enhanced cooperation, where you can get member states to work together. Is that what you're looking for?
Yes and no. It's more, when we are talking about cooperation among member states, it's really for us as a sector, as an energy sector, more about, okay, how can energy freely travel through the EU? But for us as a company wanting to invest, it really is more about, does the money that we put on the table, does it get picked up, right? And for the moment, there is no clarity at all if there's a market. And that really is a pain. So please, 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 if there are policymakers, think about that in very practical terms.
Thank you. And we'll obviously bring Enrico in, who will have a lot to say about that. So I'm going to now turn back to Andrea. Andrea, thank you for joining us again this year. You are a key partner to our work, and it would be great to hear from you in terms of what you're making. I'm over here. It's okay. That you've always been really clear and articulate about the kind of gap between innovation and investment and the policy framework for it, and that you've said that coherently over the years. Do you feel that things have changed in the time since last year? What's your take on both the public-private partnership deal and whether we're getting it right, or what needs to change to get it right in terms of alignment or any of the things that you've spoken about previously?
Thank you, Dharmendra. Thank you all. I think a quick answer to your point is maybe. In other words, yes and no. What I try to say, I think that the push, the call towards innovation is a bit everywhere in Europe. I think no one today would stand up as a policymaker, as a decision maker. I'm not standing behind innovation. They all want to call for it. But then they stop. And there is a strong, strong misalignment between policy statement, programs, and investment. There's this type of dichotomy, Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde. If I talk about innovation, I'm Dr. Jekyll because I want to really bring innovation in many sectors. Enjoy the efficiency gain that brings innovation to society. But when I have to say, okay, so I have to invest, it's not only that the arms became short and the pockets very deep, but it's the fact that there is no alignment, there's no planification, there's no predictability. And we treat many sectors. The sector where I work for, is in healthcare. For the people around the table, I'm working for Radio Life Sciences. We do heart valves, first heart valves in 1962. Is the fruit of collaboration. There was a doctor there, Edwards, typical American, they went in engineering, they went to a doctor and said, I want to do an artificial heart, vision. The doctor introduced the element of predictability. Let's start with one valve, just to make sure that, we can progress and bring. Today, after 60 years, we can treat transcatheter, all the 4 valves. This is breakthrough innovation. People is sedate, not anymore, in full anesthesia, 24 hours, 48 hours out of the hospital, reducing the burden of the disease, making people healthier. This innovation, when you match and you try to get in Europe, you talk with innovators, with policymakers, I want it. When you start to say how I can introduce that, the investment don't follow. And what we heard several times is that resources are finite, but bottom line, we heard also yesterday during the dinner in one of the speech, we keep spending the money absolutely out of control. We keep contributing in wasting money and taking that as a given, rather than reallocation money, lack of political leadership. Who is going to put the hands on all these investments? OECD in 2017, is almost 8 years, before COVID, so there are no any extra particular element of interference, show that only in the hospital sector, you have 27% of resource wasting, of money wasting. Is €1 out of 4. Is enormous. What has been done is a fact. You see, reported this data like I'm doing. People report to show that they've read, like myself, that we know the numbers, but nothing happened, honestly. And this misalignment between policy, I repeat, that sometimes when you read are fantastic, and investment is still the great ballast to really have this progress producing their effect in society.
Andrea, brilliantly said, but in terms of where the blockage is it the case, as I said earlier, you don't know who's in charge? Or is it a case of a member state issue? Or is it a commission-wide conditioning issue?
One magic word that has been also used before several times is the famous, we live in an environment that is fragmented. True. We will listen, after we listened also yesterday, Enrico Letta, his critical report about the single mark. It's all about that. For me, it's all written that in that report. My question is more how we make it happen, how we translate that in action. That's a moment in which, you know, it's good to think, it's good to talk, but there is a moment also for action. And we like to inject a sense of urgency. My question to you and to the audience, how we can translate a sense of urgency in predictable actions.
Because if I've heard you right previously, but also in conversations, is that it's not a case of you not having money. You've got the money to invest in various parts of Europe. You just want someone to get their act together and create the right conditions. Is that?
Exactly. The issue is not, and again, I'm looking for a very, I would say, partial or very specific sector that is the health sector. But bottom line, you know, when I say we keep spending money in repeating technical operation or investing in usual stuff without, I think that innovation, you know, let me use this expression, is like the nose. It's big, it's great, it's in the middle of our face, but we don't see it. We need someone that put a mirror, say, look, it's there, how I can adopt and how I can get the benefit of it. That's I think is the critical stuff. And if I can look that, no one, and I don't want to be labeled for that. I'm not here to say someone or looking who is the guilty one. We are all guilty because we are not able to join forces on that. I'm a strong believer of public-private partnership because I'm convinced that no one sector, either public or other private, can do it alone. And the demonstration is the status quo. We don't need, with all the respect, another 100 McKinsey's analysis. We need just to say, look how we live. Look at the wasting that we are generating. Look how the society is degrading. So how we can do? It's just joining that forces, but we need a vision. We need, I think Enrico said yesterday, we need leadership, fundamental, and then we need a predictable plan.
And all that you're saying, people will recognize, and we know this, you know. That's the thing about this kind of discussion, is that the diagnostic is clearly clear. It's just the action. And what seems to be at the heart of this, and perhaps some of you can comment on this, is it because there's no one in charge of that agenda? Or is it, for example, would Meloni give up elements of subsidiarity to create and close a single market? I think that it goes to the heart of the council, because at the one end, prime ministers will say, absolutely, but then they want to guard their telecoms industry, they want to guard their grid, etc., and not prepared to give up to go further. But I don't want you to answer that question because I'm going to go to Mr. Letta. Your family must be thinking, my God, your name is everywhere since you produced your report, right? And, you know, I remember in the first few months with you and your contemporary, Mr. Draghi, it's like, you know, you became like prayer beads in the policy circle. Letta Draghi, Letta Draghi. You know, people are, you know, moving it around constantly thinking, hopefully something will happen. Yet, what you did was create a diagnosis and a pathway. And yet, here we are in October. Right? And the world has changed since January, which we should have planned for in any case. Enrico, share with us firstly your thoughts on the reaction to the actions that you set out, and what do you think needs to give and to move us forward?
I start with bad news and good news. Bad news is, I start with bad. Bad news is what happened in the last 9 months, showing the complicated political and institutional way in which we in Europe we work for contingencies also. We were obliged the Commission, the member states, all the political leadership was obliged to focus on one topic that is a total lose-lose topic: tariffs. Nothing to gain, only to lose, and a big absorption of energy. With one big problem for us, because of our weakness on defense and military, we were obliged to, how we say, not to fight as we should, because it was necessary to keep the US on board in Ukraine. And that was one of the reasons why, at the end of the day, the big impact on what happened in the last 9 months, we were obliged to, the good news is what we said yesterday, there's this 2028. So there's today a commitment, and the commitment is something that can be fundamental as a deadline to do things, to mobilize energies, and is something fundamental for governments, institutions, but also for stakeholders. I think there's a space of 3 years in which stakeholders can play their role, can be proactive, and this is also the reason why we launched this initiative here, because we want to have everyone proactive and using these 3 years, creating the roadmaps and trying to be very concrete. I give you one example of something very concrete that can be also the outcome of this meeting today, because I take the point on the solar energy and all the problems of bureaucracy and so on. One of the fundamental problems of the European Union is the fact that our legislative process has always been based on directives. So my very simple point is to take all the engagement to stop the use of directives and to move everything to regulations. It is simple to say. I think it is not complicated to apply. It is fundamentally a game changer because it's the way to avoid the fragmentation. You know very well that the fragmentation is because of the bad application, implementation of each member state of the different directives. Because there's the domestic lobbies asking for protection at national level. The Commission is not the Commission of 30 years ago, tough against member states. I was Minister of Single Market when I was very young in a previous century. And I remember the Commission with a baton. Today, we know very well that the situation is different. The European Council is stronger, prime ministers are very strong, and it's very complicated for a Commission to open infringement procedures, to bring to the Court of Justice. And so the attitude of member states is to apply the directives with their own interests. And this is very simple to say. I know it is not very attractive. It is not a moonshot, but it is a real game changer. Stop directives.
But sorry to interrupt you, right? But turkeys don't vote for Christmas. Who's going to vote on that?
But I tell you what I told to some prime ministers. I told them, you protect one part of your system, but you lose a lot of opportunities for many other activities because you refrain the system to be a level playing field. And on many of them, I told them, in this field, you are stopping your competitiveness, the competitiveness of your people. And this is, for me, the most crucial point. This fragmentation is something very concrete. Can I would say, make you laughing a little bit? For professional reasons, I rented a very small apartment in the center of a European capital. And I started negotiating the contract for the electric energy of this apartment. So changing and a call center, very kind, very efficient. At the end of the conversation, please tell me your just two final details: your bank account number and your telephone number, just for the dossier. And then we sign the agreement. I gave him my bank account and I gave him my telephone number. Silence on the other side. What is this IT before your bank account? And what is this plus 39 before your number? I don't want to mention the country, and I need a plus. And my first reaction, I tell you very frankly, was to tell this man, please, I send you my report on the single market.
Well done.
That is showing that I have the right to have electricity here, even with an Italian bank account number, and even with, but it is happening everywhere. I'm sure that here in Brussels, people living in Brussels know very well what does it mean and why it works like that. Because each country is protecting his national champions.
But isn't that the bugger? Isn't that the bugger of the issue? That you were, when you were Prime Minister, you would have had all that behind you saying, actually, we're not going to have the sovereignty of our grid, sovereignty of our X, Y, and Z. Do you think that the appetite for closure?
I tried in my period to, I would say, to help a merger between the Italian incumbent and the Spanish incumbent in telecom. And it failed for big resistances in the two countries. But I think if you take, for instance, the American landscape, the Chinese landscape of big companies in some important sectors, and you take the European one, in the European one, we have the same landscape of 20, you mentioned 22 years ago. Yes, we have the same names, the same landscape, without any merger. You take energy, you take telecom, you take the banking system. We have exactly the same landscape. And in 22 years, the world has completely changed. Yeah. So the key point is exactly that. By the way, 22 years ago, you mentioned what happened. I add to your list that was very good one point that is not very attractive, but for me it was the beginning of all the problems. Italy, France, and Germany together at the first step, broke the Stability Pact immediately after the beginning of the euro. And that was the beginning of bad behaviors that we had, and we know what is creating. But in 22 years, everything has changed, and we are there. So my point is that this sense of urgency is something that can speak to the people, because all the entrepreneurs, all the small and medium-sized entrepreneurs, all the start-uppers, everyone is confronted to these obstacles. At the same time, is something that with this idea of the fragmentation and the cost of the fragmentation is something that can be useful also for member states. We need, if I may say, some, I would say, smart political approach. For instance, in Europe, when you say we build up European champions, you have two approaches. 25 countries are against because they think that all the European champions will go to France and Germany. And you have two countries pushing for creating European champions, France and Germany. We need to have a very, I would say, smart approach to say, in Europe, we need to give all the 27 something to sell to their public opinion. If we are not able to do so, it will be very easy to have all the obstacles, because we are in a complex system where there's the European system and there is the national countries, national member state system. So is the other key point, and we have to, but you know, the sense of what is happening, this 2028, this mission is for me something that can mobilize energies. Kelly gave us good news for Europe. I asked Madeleine to give good news. Why don't you create a European Borgen series in Netflix? I think
he was desperate to get that in a public setting, right? So everyone's heard Enrico
it
say,
could be
please,
great.
Morgan.
And I think it could be fantastic also for you, because you will have, you have to, all the languages, you need all the people, all the stereotypes, but it could be fantastic. There is no other place in the world where you have representative of 27 countries, all speaking bad English. It's absolutely great.
Enrico, thank you. Can I go back to a serious point? I think the humor is absolutely important. From what you are experiencing right now, you're an ex-Prime Minister, you're in touch with colleagues across the Council in different ways. What is the appetite for what you're suggesting? Is there an appetite? And do we need to have someone in place who's in charge? The czar of the single market? Or is that just going to push it to another end?
I don't like czar by definition.
Of course, yes.
So,
my bad. Yeah.
no, I don't think in Europe we have a sort of collective exercise, collective intelligence that works. But I saw all the member states. I visited all the countries. I spoke with all governments. And I want to surprise you. No matter a government was pro-European or Eurosceptic, the sense of the fact that we are, I would say, losing jobs, losing investments, we are declining because of our fragmentation, of our bureaucracy, is something that is present everywhere. The big topic is to give the possibility to all the leaders and all the member states to clearly see the advantage and to clearly show the advantage. Now, I'm not joking about Netflix. We need a narrative that can be the good narrative today. So we need a narrative, a storytelling where it is clear that, for instance, for me, it's one of the big, I would say, waste of this period. We had a fantastic story in a very sad moment. That was the vaccines.
Absolutely, yeah.
The vaccines in Europe. It was a great story, positive story. We are all forgetting this story. It's in a totally marginalized, but that was great. I remember when everything started, all the experts telling us in Europe, vaccines, 5 years. And then 9 months, because all the unity, the integration. So the message that united, we are stronger, is a true message. And why we are understanding this message all together only when we are in a COVID or when Putin is invading Ukraine, and not in a daily life that is fundamental.
Indeed. And your point is really well made, and is that if we could bottle up our actions during adversity and create a vaccine, gosh, the single market would be done really, really quickly. But your point about a narrative is absolutely key. The thing is that we keep on peddling a sense of despair and doom and lack of hope. And I think one of the things that occurs to all of us is that there are folk out there feeling vulnerable, left out, and not included. That's the vast majority of people out there who are not in this room. And I think that what we are taking our foot off in terms of the pedal is the dissonance, dilemma, contradictions that are taking place, which, if we don't address them, we're going to leave the right to frame our future narrative. And that's, I think, the biggest message for all of us if we're going to do something about it. Enrico, thank you. I have less than 10 minutes for anyone who has that sense of urgent desire to make a comment or raise a question. Not to anybody that's spoken, but a question to all of us. Any of you? Now, there should be a mic, I hope. It's coming. It's a good thing in the sense that because we're oversold, you're sitting in the, in the gods.
Yes, we feel that way. I want to thank...
Please introduce yourself.
Yes, apologies. Sandrine Dixon de Clève, former co-president of the Club of Rome, executive chair of Earth for All and Systems Transformation Hub. And I want to thank Professor Letta, who started to make a link between your brilliant introduction around the major elephants in the room, the crises, the blind spots that are in front of us and yet we do not see. Climate change, the fact that we did transition during COVID, and of course, the obsession with competitiveness, while we have the greatest inequality and poverty that is growing, and the UNDP report that has announced to us for the first time that actually, as humanity, we are no longer progressing. So I want to see whether we cannot, in the next conversations, try to draw the links between the depth of the need for a new competitive single market, which actually takes into consideration some of the lack of progress that we're seeing, and also the compound effects of the crises that we have before us, because that has not come out enough.
Yeah.
One of the key issues that we find ourselves with is the continuous knee-jerk reactions, as Professor Letta has so clearly indicated over the last 9 months, of where we are on the offensive rather than on, or the defensive rather than on the offensive. How can Europe rebuild itself with a new coal and steel community type of logic, which takes into consideration the single market, builds itself up through not self-flagellation, which is exactly, as we've heard, the biggest problem that we have, and instead a vision of the future that is not based on tech bro feudalism, bullying from the United States, or a sense of loss because we're not competing against the Chinese. I'll close with one last point. We have not talked about new types of partnerships, new trade deals, new conversations with China, Latin America, and Africa. The fact that we have an African continent that has the largest young population that we could tap into in terms of collaboration and co-creation of a better type of industrial market that actually is global, not just necessarily European. So those are just a few thoughts. Thank you.
Sandrine, thank you. As ever, really good value. But Edna, before you give up the mic, you've been, at the Club of Rome, where, it can be a homing ground for a lot of ex-leaders. What was your last sense of the kind of things you're talking about? From your experience, could some of these leaders hold that reality of saying competitiveness, but also that has to be about tackling inequality and creating a better mood music socially?
Absolutely. I mean, we have a variety of different scenarios, foresight thinking, de-risking, that actually should be better integrated into both our industry. We're working with insurance companies. We're working with a variety of different sectors. I want to bring us all back to who we are as humans, first of all.
Precisely, yeah.
We have a problem with the fact that we put on our professional hat. At this time, we need enlightened men and women that actually prove our dear Jane Goodall wrong, even though I adored her, which is, as she said to all of us, we are the most intelligent species, but we're not the wisest. Let us prove that we are wise. Coming back to Professor Letta's point, let us prove that as Europeans, and I speak to you with an American accent, but I am French-Belgian, let us prove that actually we are not going just to react to the bullying, we're going to stand up to it. Because I have not seen that yet.
Indeed.
With a vision of Europe that goes beyond just trying to be a sovereign digital state, but that actually innovates in a very different way. We have the brain power. Let's use it.
Absolutely. And thank you very much. Because you're right about, we've all... We know, as I was saying about earlier in my opening remarks, about the power of fear, but the power of the bully in the classroom and in the playground. And I remember, and I'm going to turn to this lovely individual here, Dalia, who's sitting here, who spoke very elegantly in previous years about being able to stand up to Putin, because by not doing that, we find ourselves in the position that we are. So I've only got less than 5 minutes, but Dalia, if you want to, I would love for you to contribute on that point, because I think that's what's missing right now, our inability to stand up to a me syndrome and not a Europe syndrome.
I was not prepared to intervene,
course you weren't, I know.
but yes. But I'm from the region which is bordering the external threat to Europe. We're talking about internal market, but this internal market is under threat and pressure, not only from the east, let's say rival and enemy, but also from the transatlantic and friendful and chaotic partnership. So having that in mind, the idea which we try to develop ourselves and looking for some kind of European joint denominator is important to reflect such kind of external challenges and threats. And for our region, for new member states, then we already 20 and plus years in European Union, there is not a problem about common market, and there is not a problem about the different bank accounts, whatever, because we joined immediately into common market. We jumped through that time where all the member states with their large scale and inertia are not developing so fast on financial services, competitiveness. We jumped through it. And for us, it is not a problem at all. And even common market is not so problematic. We are far ahead of some old inactive member states. Then we were going, as a president, I was going for Germany, for example. I was not able to find 10 years ago Wi-Fi at all. And in our case, everywhere on the street corner you can do it. So why I'm saying that what we are discussing today, it's fine. It's still very much inside closed European mentality, but we under pressure to open up because the world externally is requesting Europe to be more competitive, faster, and to secure ourselves, because it looks like that before we are becoming even more global, we will need to be more regional to survive, because global friends becoming global rivals, or even sometimes in chaotic case, enemies. So here the nearest European challenges with the all fundamental goals still we need to do. But I think that we need to look into experience not only around the world, but also into some regions of European Union, including new member states who are very dynamic, not afraid to be flexible, not afraid to be courageous, and not afraid to be European.
Dalia, thank you. This wasn't planned, by the way. I'm just a great fan of Dalia continuing to be a brilliant stateswoman, and given the time that she was president, my goodness, the kind of nonsense that she would have had to deal with, and she's still here and speaking proudly and loudly. I need to finish, but what I want to do is, colleagues, I want you to put up the quote from Delors, because yesterday we announced the launch of a new foundation. In this centenary year, for obvious reasons, a very powerful quote from a man who clearly had a very simple strategic vision, but unfortunately we've not been able to complete the building of that house that he refers to, because that house has many gaps, windows, and it needs a bit of plumbing and a bit more, let's say, upholding and a lot more love than it's getting at the moment. But I want to finish with two people who want to come in. So, Oana, you wanted to come in or not? But very, very short. And then I'm going to end with you, Jacqueline.
Thank you. To Dalia's point, I really agree that we need to be more regional and competitive before being global. But one thing that I want to say, and I agree with this idea of investment in defense and security, but in the same time, the whole purpose of building an army industry and procurement is to have it so you don't have to use it. What do I mean by that is that I think in that we need to be very wise in making sure we allocate the funding on innovation and dual use, because throughout history, these moments of challenges have always been a gap, a way forward in terms of innovation, in terms of new inventions. So I think we really need to hurry, but be very focused on allocating the resources that we have on innovation and dual use that serves the society as a whole beyond their defense purpose. So that is one. And second, because also we're never hopefully gonna need it, in the sense that the European Union is never gonna go conquer others, simply because we have this amazing power of attraction. And the amazing power of attraction that we have, that's a convener and an inviter to others to join us, that will always be more powerful than any other instruments, and that needs to be our core investment in the future.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. I need to finish because I'm eating into your coffee and tea break. But Madeleine, but I also want to note that we have LinkedIn in the room at a very senior level, and as I kind of conclude, is there anything that's burning in your belly that you want to share? Please introduce yourself.
Sure. Blake Lott, Chief Global Affairs and Legal Officer.
LinkedIn.
From LinkedIn, yes. I've unofficially been a friend of Europe for many years, but glad to officially become a friend of Europe today. So glad to be here. I guess I just say that with a lot going on and with what we've heard from Mr. Letta, when you're talking about making the single market a reality, at least on the job side, that's what we're trying to do in LinkedIn. It's not about borders. It's not about here or there. It's about how do we provide economic opportunity all across Europe. I do think there's lots of great points made across the board here. It's a powerful moment right now, as folks have been saying. The 80 years after the end of World War II, two of the great assumptions of how the United States and Europe are in question. So for many years, it's been free trade and security guarantees, and now it's maybe not. So what's important is for there to still be that strong tie between the United States and Europe, and we are a global platform, and like I said, in a lot of ways, we try to bring that single market to life on the job side, and we're going to continue to do that for years to come.
Thank you. Thank you for coming in that manner. But, one of the things that we learned during Trump won was it was city mayors and cities and regions that collaborated across the Atlantic in a way that we couldn't imagine. Let's hope the same happens. Madeleine, I want to end with you.
Oh, wow. Well,
I know, that's quite a lot. That's big deal, right?
And we like a challenge, so we see maybe talk with our content leads. They're very open for conversations, and I would say Mr. Letta could potentially be a protagonist. We could say that because
he only wants Borgen done. That's the only answer he wants from you.
Yeah, I know, and I love to be put on the spot, but more, no kidding. I think let's continue sharing stories together, and let's continue building connections, and that is why Friends of Europe is here. So thank you for that.
Thank you, so, colleagues. That's it. It's been a wild time. It's gone really quickly when you're having fun. I want to thank all our discussants for triggering, stimulating, and I hope provoking thoughts in the right direction. But what we do know is the times are gone where we say we go back to the day job and it'll all be okay. I hope the one message here is that there is a sense of urgency, and we can't treat it as anything other than that, because otherwise future generations will not forgive us, I believe. So thank you all very much. You now have a coffee break. There's a session here in this room, which is going to be about, let me just see, I need my glasses. So in here we've got Beyond Borders, a European Union at 35, and upstairs we'll have Not Giving Up, Securing a Safe Climate for All. But we'll have colleagues outside helping you and directing you. Thank you all very much for your time and your energy and for being present. Thank you.